Good morning. Wonderful to get a chance to share with you this morning. I'd like to read in English the passage that was just read. Such a beautiful expression and remembrance that the words of Jesus and the words of our scriptures are shared around the world in a lot of different contexts. Matthew 9, beginning in verse 9, says, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, he told him. And Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? On hearing this, Jesus said, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have come to call the righteous, I've come not to call the righteous, but sinners. It's World Communion Sunday, and that idea really resonates with me so beautifully. It's a beautiful image, right? The idea of people around the world in any context. Can you bring it to mind? Maybe some of you have traveled globally, and you can actually picture the context of people elsewhere that are in there. You know, they're coming to the communion table. It doesn't look like this, right? It may be at a jungle somewhere. It may be, in an adobe hut somewhere. It may be, all kinds of different contexts, right? And obviously in different languages. But it's the same table that we come to. And that is a beautiful, beautiful sentiment to me. Over and over again in the New Testament, the idea of a shared table is presented as a place and a symbol of blessing. You think of, we all need food, so there's that idea, there's that first of all, that food is provided, and there's a hospitality aspect to it. But it's also, there's something powerful about breaking bread together, shared bread together, right? Shared meal together. The feeding of the 5,000 was cool because 5,000 men plus women and children got fed. But it was more than the food, wasn't it? It was the miracle, and it was the fellowship, and this idea of thousands of people spread across a hillside or a mountainside, sitting down and sharing a powerful thing together. The church in Acts, what we often call the first church, said that they met together and they broke bread together, daily, regularly, as they studied and prayed and everything. The idea of breaking bread was a real important part of that. It was around the Last Supper table that Jesus gave us the example of washing feet and said, go and do likewise. Now that I, your Lord, have done it for you, you go and do this. And that happened around the unique fellowship that happens at a table, at a shared table. And then, of course, there's the direction that Jesus gave us that has led us to the Eucharist, the communion, the bread and the cup. As often as you do this, remember me. And that idea of a shared table is where he chose to communicate that blessing and to extend to us, hey, this is where you remember this. This is where you hold on to this. It's something powerful about a shared table. To invite someone to a shared table is to invite them to a place of belonging and blessing. Okay? Belonging and blessing. I have a large family. Thanksgiving is quite a thing. There's this table that just kind of goes on and on. At times at my dad's house, it actually has bent around the corner, like down a hallway, right? And because we're going to get more people at the table, right? Because we're a large family and you don't want to leave anybody out, right? You want everybody to feel like they have a place of belonging, like they belong in this family and that they get to share in the blessing of this family, right? It's beautiful, right? It's heartwarming. This idea of Jesus, of the World Communion Table, World Communion Day, man, speaks to me on that level. Belonging and blessing. Think about what happens when you are denied a place at the table. What are you denied exactly? You are denied belonging, and you are denied blessing. And that the table is a powerful symbol, and we live it in real time, right? I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but have you ever been wounded a little by not being invited to a table? Somebody's party, somebody's gathering, somebody's Thanksgiving thing that you weren't part of or something like that. That loss, it's not just you didn't get to eat that day. You probably did eat that day. It was much, much bigger than that, right? Belonging and blessing is what the shared table is about. And Jesus extends that to the communion table. So the Pharisees in chapter 9 made three pretty classic mistakes when they saw Jesus eating at the tax collector's house, and it was like, you're eating with all the lowlifes. You're eating with all the scum. Why are you doing that? You're supposed to be a holy man. There's three things that they forgot about the shared table. The first is this. They judged in their own heart who deserved belonging and blessing. They judged who deserved belonging and blessing. Is that not the way of humankind? Is that not the way of society in so many contexts? Have you ever felt judged that you did not deserve belonging and blessing? Someone decided for whatever reason that you were outside of that. It's always interesting. The people who decide who gets belonging and blessing are always on the inside of where the line is drawn. Have you noticed that? Right? You've never had somebody go, here's who deserves it, and by the way, I'm on the outside. I don't get any. All right? That was the Pharisees' mistake, first of all, to decide that they could decide who deserved belonging and blessing. Now, and on what basis did they make that judgment is really interesting, right? They're kind of like, tax collector. It's like, I don't need to know anything else about him. Tax collector, low life, you should not be sharing a table with them. And there's a judgment made because of who this person is or their vocation, their station in life, okay? How many of you can say with honesty that you yourself have judged who deserves belonging and blessing? I certainly have. I certainly have. We frequently don't do it even consciously. We have a little framework set up in our mind. Maybe it was the way we were raised. Maybe it's the society we live in, whatever it is. But we have decided these people are the good, the deserving. These people, not so much. And that gets applied a lot of different ways, right? So their first mistake was judging who deserved belonging and blessing. Their second mistake was their automatic assumption that they, the Pharisees, did deserve belonging and blessing. It's like when they say, hey, you're eating with tax collectors, the unstated part of that is instead of us. You're not eating with people like us, high, righteous, holy people. That's who you should be. And their assumption right out of the gate is we deserve to be at the table because we're righteous and we're holy, okay? Also a common mistake that happens in society, right? And their third mistake was the biggest one of all. They forgot whose table it was. This is Christ's table. The table that the Lord sits at is his table. And I don't get to decide who sits at it and who doesn't. And I don't get to decide whether I sit at it and don't. It's not my table. Frequently in society, you hear the phrase like, oh, let's give a seat at the table to a certain marginalized group or a group of people who don't have a voice in this conversation. It's not that that's not well-meaning, but do you know what it assumes? It assumes that the people that are making the decision are the ones that get to decide who's at the table. You already are, sorry, men have done this for generations, right? Let's give women a seat at the table. Well, you know, we're sort of assuming it was our table to give that to in the first place. We can get in. Same thing can happen with race. Same thing can happen with national prowess. Anyway, we can go all the way down that road. But in the case of this table, the table of Christ, understanding whose table it is, and it's not mine, and it's not yours. This is Christ's table. That ought to speak a little humility into all that we're doing and seeking God's heart on who comes to the table. You know the great thing about this table? Sometimes at Thanksgiving it has felt like my dad's table was never ending, like it just went around the corner, you couldn't even see the end of it or things like that. But of course it did actually have an ending. There was a point where we couldn't fit any more people, okay? This table is not like that. This table stretches around the globe. This table is stretching, as we sit here, into jungle places, into adobe places, into poor places, into rich places, into first world places, into third world places. That table is unending. It's also unending in the time continuum, and here's what I mean by that. You have a seat at that table today. You had one yesterday. You'll have one tomorrow. You have one eternally. That is the message of the cross. That table it's like the Thanksgiving meal that never ends, except you don't get the indigestion, right? You just go on, and that place is always there for us. What an incredible thing to think about. I'm pretty emotional and in awe this morning. Jamie asked me to preach on October 1st. He must have asked me like back in April or May. So it's been on the calendar for a long time. I didn't realize until recently that it was World Communion Sunday. And I sure didn't realize that World Communion Sunday was going to intersect with the decision by the church session to be an open and affirming church. That has blown my mind. I don't know how that, well, I do know how that timing came about. It was not my hand or any human hand. What a beautiful and perfect statement of the table unending, of the table that can stretch, of the table where all have a seat, all have an invitation, and our willingness to acknowledge that and embrace that has my heart so much. I'm so appreciative of it for the church leadership of Trinity. It means that we extend belonging and blessing to some who may not have felt that belonging and blessing extended to them. It means that we move a little closer to being the heart of Christ. Our collective heart changes as we erase a few more of the lines that would hold people outside of the table of Christ. It's powerful and it's so important. Thank you. Here's the kicker. What is communion actually about? Is it about the elements? You got to get the right bread and the right liquid. Are they magic? The elements aren't magic. We use the bread and grape juice, but you know that you can receive communion and be part of the powerful statement of communion if you've got Ritz crackers and a thimbleful of water. We honor the elements to facilitate the powerful presence of God there, but the magic's not in the elements, right? We know this, right? Is it about the ritual of communion, that we have to do things in a certain order, that we have to say certain words? We know that it's not. The ritual has its place because the ritual facilitates our being able to engage this powerful engagement we have. But it's not about the elements at its core, and it's not about the ritual. What is it about? Communion, communing with God, being in connection with God. You know as well as I do, you can come to this table, take the elements, say the prayer, go through the ritual, and never connect with God. You also know that you don't need the perfect elements and the perfect ritual in order to commune with God. The Spirit of God is what communion is about. It's a spiritual connection that manifests in a physical sacrament. But the spiritual connection is what it's about, right? And you know this, I think you know this. We know this in our soul. Our soul resonates with that. And if that is true, I want to present to you a radical idea this morning, okay? We call ourselves Christians, literally translated, little Christ. When we are Christians, we are intending to be, trying to be extensions of Christ. Amen? We're trying to embody His love, His grace, His forgiveness, His boldness, all of those things, right? That's what little Christ would do, okay? Well, this right here is a nice piece of furniture that's beautiful and facilitates our communion in a powerful and meaningful way. But this is actually not the communion table. You and I are the communion table. We are the extensions of Christ. We are the extensions of that table. We get to be those who carry out the love of Christ. What this bread means, what this cup means, that gratitude for Jesus' sacrifice for us, you and I then get to go from this physical manifestation of a table and be the spiritual manifestation of that. It's not that people come to the table to honor the table. It's that the table gets extended. You're a leaf in the table. Does that make sense? Right? You take it a little farther out into where you're at, and you have the ability to take that with you. But in order to do that, we're going to have to keep remembering whose table it is, and stopping short of drawing the lines around that. Every day should be World Communion Sunday. Every day around you should be, you're a follower of Christ, should be World Communion Sunday, because you carry that Spirit with you and you make it available to others. You become the vessel that carries belonging and blessing the way that a shared meal does to other people, right? Think about that. Think about the capacity that you have before this day is over. Before you put your head on the pillow tonight, think about the capacity that you have to carry as a vessel of love, grace, forgiveness, compassion, gentleness. You have the capacity to carry that because you are an extension of this table. It's a cool thing to be, if we will just avoid drawing the lines that want to keep people away from it. So